Hello, seasoners. Welcome back to another episode of the Travel and Tourism Podcast, my first season. My guest today began her Club Med journey as a reception geo and later served as chief of horseback. Her first season was at Club Med Sandpiper in 1997. Originally from Walnut Creek, California, she grew up right near an equestrian center, which sparked her passion for horses. She went on to play polo at UC Santa Barbara while studying communications and also showcased her vocal talents by singing in the All-State Honor Choir. Her path to Club Med was first set in motion during a family vacation to Club Med Playa Blanca when she was a teenager. Now living in Florida, please join me in welcoming the talented and dynamic Kelly Hammett. Hey, Kelly, how are you?
Hi, Greg. How are you? Thanks so much for having me.
No, thank you for being here. And let's start by thanking Catherine first, Catherine Cloward, for the intro. She referred me to you. You graciously said yes and accepted. So thank you, Catherine. Shout out, Catherine. I understand you two work together.
Yes. Shout out to Catherine. Thanks, Kat.
We do have a lot to cover because your before Club Med is very, very interesting. I don't know where to start, but I'm going to jump in. So you were, I guess, lucky or fortunate enough to grow up with an equestrian center right behind your house. Is this true?
Yes. I grew up in Walnut Creek, as you said, and we lived on a home that backed up to this little greenbelt area that just over the hill and through the woods was this beautiful equestrian center, DeVito Equestrian Center. And I worked there for many years throughout my young, I guess, junior high, all through high school, and sometimes college when I came back from school, and became very close with the owner of the center and was kind of her right-hand man. So I was teaching lessons, mucking stalls, running summer camps for the kids, getting paid to ride other people's horses for them while they were on vacation or to exercise them on a regular basis. So I got much of my love and activity and exposure to horses through DeVito Equestrian Center.
Your specialty, I guess I should say, was hunter jumper. Can you explain to our listeners what that is?
Sure. So there are various styles of riding. Some people like to ride Western and chase cattle and barrel race and rodeo. And other people like to ride English style that consists of different disciplines. Dressage would be one of them that people might recognize as the ballet of horseback riding. It's where you get these beautiful horses that have so many skills and you work your way around the arena with just doing this amazing dance routine, amazing display of partnership between horse and rider. I always found that to be a discipline I did not enjoy. So I got into hunter jumpers, which is more riding around the ring, going through jumping courses, being judged on your ability to get through the entire course without knocking down fences. And while I didn't compete in that, that's really where my passion was, and took a lot of lessons, jumping lessons, and eventually worked at the equestrian center to teach younger kids how to do the same thing.
I've talked to a few geos over the years that have been on water polo teams, but I've never encountered one who actually played on, varsity polo. So what's it like being on the polo team at UC Santa Barbara?
That was a very exciting experience for me. I never dreamed that I would end up doing that, but as I became active in a variety of extracurricular things at UC Santa Barbara, I joined a sorority. I'm trying to remember how I came across the two captains who ran the team, but somehow I got involved where they were looking for volunteers to not only learn how to play and join the team, but also help the team care for the horses that were donated to us by the Santa Barbara Polo Club. So we had all of these, I guess, reject, if you will, polo ponies that were no longer good enough to be used by the professional players. And we would go over there early in the morning and care for the horses and practice. And we had jerseys and team swag and ended up traveling with all of these ponies that we took care of and played schools like USC, Stanford, UC Davis. And it was a lot of fun. It was arena polo, not field polo. So it's a little bit different. It's kind of like hockey in the ring where you can kind of bounce the ball off the walls and slam your opponent into the wall if you need to get out of the way. So it was very exciting, a lot of fun doing that.
Okay, I could talk more about polo, but I got to switch to the All-State Honor Choir and as you explained to me, it wasn't what I thought. I thought this was pitch perfect and you guys were doing riff-offs. You told me, no, it's not like that at all, right? Can you just explain a little bit about what kind of songs you sang?
Sure. This is more of a formal choral experience, and it started in high school as I was in concert choir with probably 30, 40 other high school students, and became more interested in performing and auditioned for our madrigal group, which was kind of like the upper level singing group that we did a little more of what you're thinking about, that pitch perfect kind of stuff. But as we became more competitive, choir participants have an opportunity to audition for the all-state honor choir, which brings top level students from all over the state together in a one-time performance where for months we all rehearse on our own, learn the music, come together with prominent directors and musicians and do these performances that include, pieces from the Messiah and sometimes spirituals. And it's all very classical. It's not, singing the pop music that with the mashups and beatboxing and that kind of stuff. It was full on stand up straight, watch the director. And when I say cut, you cut kind of choir performance.
Excellent. Very, very fascinating. Okay, I'm going to switch now because I could go longer, but let's get into the Club Med. Some people are here for the Club Med. So as I mentioned in your intro, you were about 15 years old when you went to Club Med Playa Blanca as a GM.
That's correct.
What was that like? It must have been a lot of fun. Geez, I can only imagine going to Club Med as a teenager and to Playa.
My mom did the best thing by taking my brother and I to Playa Blanca for Christmas. And back then, I don't know how she got two, 15 and 16-year-olds into the club. But if it was still singles then, I don't know how she snuck us in. But we had the best time. She enrolled him in a scuba diving week, and she enrolled me in an intensive horseback riding week. And I would show up to the arena every day and get lessons by a professional, and they'd take us trail riding, and we had absolutely the best time. It was the most fun I'd ever had on vacation, to the effect of I talked about it every day for pretty much the rest of my life. And it was the number one factor that led me to want to get a job with Club Med.
Did you have, I guess when you were 15, did you even consider that, one day, 1997, I'm going to be working here as a GO? Did that cross your mind at all back then or no?
I didn't think that it was going to actually happen, but I did say the minute we got back from that vacation, I want to work for Club Med when I grow up. So I didn't know myself well enough back then to understand that when I put my mind to something, it's going to happen and I'm going to do it. But that's what happened. I went through college, went to UC Santa Barbara, had all of those experiences with performance and horseback riding, and eventually decided I'm definitely going to get a job with Club Med. And obviously my preference and my wish would be doing what the GO that taught me when I was there when I was 15, doing that level of work at Club Med. So it was a dream, which finally happened.
Forgive my ignorance, but it seems like someone who grew up with an equestrian center behind their house and has been riding since they're a little girl and then is enrolled in an intensive course. It seems to me that you could have taught the intensive course. Like, did you learn it?
Well, by the time I got there, I was the one teaching the intensive course. Yes, when you're a kid and you're interested in horses, it's a very expensive hobby. So, living at home with a single mom, I was in charge of getting all of my extracurricular activities taken care of on my own. So I would walk myself up to that equestrian center and I would earn my keep and I would get my lessons and work for my lessons. And I worked my way up. So by the time I got to that role at Playa Blanca, I was ready.
No, I meant when you were a 15-year-old GM, you could have probably taught the course, right?
Well, not quite. I still had quite a lot to learn.
Okay. So life happens. You go back home. You enroll at UC Santa Barbara. So at what point does because we're getting up to 1997 where your first season is. So how does it happen that you start thinking of it? How do you know where to apply? What was the genesis of the idea that said, I'm going to apply now?
I was getting toward the end of my senior year, preparing to graduate. And I can't remember how I got the details about the interview because you can't just Google stuff back then. But somehow I got word of the interview day that was taking place at one of the hotels in Los Angeles. Again, I don't remember the logistics of how I got there, but I got my little car and I drove from Santa Barbara and I took myself to LA and I showed up for the interview. And forgive me, I cannot remember who I interviewed with, but I do remember being in a large conference center type location, people everywhere, tables everywhere, interviews happening. And I sat down with whoever I sat down with, and I just told them about my love of horses and how I really wanted to work at Playa Blanca and teach horseback riding. And that, oh, by the way, I had a performance background. And their ears kind of perked up a little bit. And they said, oh, you sing? And I said, yes, I sing and dance. They said, well, you know, there's really no room at Playa Blanca right now. Would you consider going somewhere else first? And I said, I don't care where you send me. I'll skim the pool. I'll do anything, whatever it takes to eventually get myself to Playa Blanca. Just sign me up.
Well, let's go back to the interview for a sec, because you did something I was told not to do. I was told don't wear a suit, and I was a banker at the time. You wore a suit, and that had no bearing whatsoever. They still gave you the job, but this guy who worked for Club Ed hammered it into me. Do not wear a suit, whatever you do. You did. You aced your interview. I guess it wasn't too long after when you found out they were sending you to Sandpiper in 97 as a reception GO. Do you remember anything about arriving? Did you arrive late at night, early morning?
I believe it was a very long day for sure. And when I got to Sandpiper, it wasn't late, but it was late afternoon. And my whole world felt like it changed. I was like just thinking to myself, where am I? What is this? I believe that they might have thrown us into the reception team, like meeting everyone there, because I recall that once I got settled in, we immediately went out for dinner with the team. And I remember thinking, it's been such a long day. Here we are just sitting down to dinner at like 9:00. And it felt so European to me. You know, there was the feeling of going out to dinner and staying out late. And I was so exhausted. I didn't want anyone to know that I just wanted to put my head down on the table and go to sleep. And I was very excited about being there. But it's definitely out of your comfort zone kind of feeling, you know, just coming home from college and everything seems familiar. And then showing up at this place with all these strangers and about to start this amazing journey and really not knowing what else to expect aside from what I experienced when I was a teenager in a completely different country.
So you get to reception, they slap a name badge on you. It says Kelly. You know, I just remembered to ask you this. There's a very popular song called Kelly from the show Cheers. Woody Harrelson is singing the show, song Kelly, who played his girlfriend in the show. And I'm just curious if any GM saw your name tag and started singing the Kelly song to you.
Absolutely. I feel like we had that conversation at least every week. And to this day, that is still how I remind people of my name. And I say, remember Cheers, Kelly, 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 Kelly. And people look at me funny because they don't really remember that show at this point.
Kelly. Why? Because you're Kelly, 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 Kelly. And he starts again. Yes.
Yes. So I still use that.
So it didn't think of you or anyone to give yourself a nickname to avoid that incessant Kelly song? No one.
It never once occurred to me.
Okay.
I loved it.
Because you had so many, you must have met a lot of GOs with nicknames. So I thought you might have just, you know what, I'm gonna be Susie this season, or Suze. Okay.
It's funny that you say that. It never even occurred to me to give myself a nickname. And yes, everybody there had, there was Kiwi and there were, Beben, and there was so many people that went by something else.
Did you have a nickname growing up though? Like when you were a young kid at the equestrian center?
No, it was always just Kelly. I get Kelbell every now and again.
Kelbell,
for people who I'm really close with, they'll call me Kel or Kelbell. And I had a roommate in college who was Melissa, and we went by Mel and Kel. There's not a whole lot to work with Kelly, but that's why I keep the Woody song.
Okay. Well, it's good that you didn't have Cowbell on your badge, because some genius would have just called you Cowbell, right? No doubt. So yeah, I mean, hey, Kelly's a great name. All right. So you got Greg Schneider. Here's your chief of village. And I assume at reception, this is where you meet the Catherine Cloward, right?
The Catherine Cloward. She and I just clicked immediately. We had a really great team at the reception desk. We had a lot of fun, despite the fact that a lot of times we were kind of stuck behind the desk while all the shows were going on and things were happening. So sometimes I felt like I missed out on stuff, but thankfully, because I did sing and dance, they were relying on me and Catherine and a few of us participate a little more often. But, you know, it was there was like real office work back there. We were making money for people, withdrawing money, checking in rooms, you know, making sure we weren't messing things up, that the reception staff was preparing, making sure the rooms were clean, and people, of course, were, you know, wanting to be sure they could get in their rooms on time so they could have a lot of fun. So Catherine and I clicked right away. I have a funny story about her if now's a good time for that.
Yeah, of course.
So she and I somehow just were like the same mind operating in two different bodies. And it was never a spoken thing, but one day it just happened. Unfortunately, we did not get to room together, but every night when it was time to go to dinner, we tended to meet up and go eat together. And there was this one night where I was getting ready to go to dinner, and there's a knock at my door, and I open, and Catherine's standing there in front of the door, and we just looked at each other and started laughing because we never bothered to call each other or coordinate. It was just kind of what we did. And that's sort of how the rest of our season went. Like, we had the same thoughts, and she was so fun, and a singer also. And so we spent a lot of time in the sound booth recording and practicing. And I, even to this day, I have a tape that I recorded in the sound room with Catherine. So we had a lot of fun together. She really, to this day, is a very meaningful and important part of my life.
Which songs were you singing at Sandpiper? Because I know currently we both love Sia, Pink, you know, Katy Perry, ABBA, but what do you recall what songs you would sing on stage?
I did a lot of Jewel songs because at the time it was easy to get a hold of those on those karaoke machines. You know, the tape where you sing along with the karaoke. I did one by let's see if I can remember her name. Do you eat, sleep? Do you drink anymore? I wish I.
We're going back to the 90s, folks. Yeah, well, Jewel was also huge.
Yeah,
huge
90s
at that time in the 90s. So.
Where have you been? A little country song. Like, I just had a few go-tos that I was very comfortable with, but most of them came from that Jewel karaoke tape that I had.
Okay, so you didn't sing like Messiah or anything, or Handel on stage, or nothing like
None
that,
of
right?
that stuff.
Okay.
No, sir.
Okay. While you're at reception, because, you know, I love asking reception GOs, because you saw everyone, all the GMs, did you ever get like odd requests or just maybe questions that weren't entirely thought out? Like, I know one ex-GO I spoke to, I guess, came up to them and said their microwave wasn't working and there were no microwaves in the rooms. The GM was trying to heat up soup in the safe in the room. So did you get anything like that?
I feel like there were a lot of questions about where to find their pool towels. That seemed to come up a lot. Like, we could never clearly communicate to people that they could go get them down by the pool.
Oh, okay. Yeah, okay. Sure. The tennis courts. Yeah.
It became kind of the same spiel people check in on the weekend, and then they check out, and then the next group of people check in. And so you're kind of telling people the same spiel. So I became very familiar with the room numbers and could recall which guests were staying in those rooms the week before. And Hammett Smith came in one time from the Dallas Cowboys, and I remember checking him into his room and remembering, I remember he was in that room before you. It's very hotel. It was very, very hotel, not fun Club Med. It was like being at the reception desk of a 5-star resort.
Did you say Hammett Smith?
I did say Hammett Smith. Who
later went on to win Dancing with the Stars and now has a Mirror Ball trophy. Shout out Hammett Smith.
Sorry, I missed that, Mr. Smith.
He won. He won his season of Dancing with the Stars. Yeah, good dancer. What month did you arrive in Sandpiper? I said 97, but around what time of the year are we that you arrived?
I want to say, let's see, I was asked to go to Sandpiper to finish out a contract for somebody else who had to leave, and then I completed my own 6-month contract there. So I was there for about 8 or 9 months. And I finished up in October. So do the math on that.
Yeah, you would have arrived in the winter season, quote unquote, like January, February, something like that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
That sounds right.
So what else happens here at Sandpiper your first season? I know you're learning a lot, but do any stories or anecdotes come out of here? Did you flub up on stage at all? You know, things of that nature?
I'm sure I did. I'm sure I flubbed up on stage. I learned a lot of table parlor tricks at Sandpiper.
Excuse me? What is that? I'm sorry. What is that?
Well, those are the ones where, when the bottles of wine are at
Oh,
the
yes.
cafeteria, and you can show and bet money to someone that you couldn't get the cork out of the bottle.
Yes, I used to do the
without
same
using a
one.
cork. Do you remember?
Yeah, but
Do you remember that?
you needed to use the white linen napkins to get it out.
You have to use the linen napkin, and of course,
Yes.
we do that trick every week, and there's always the fun one where you float a cork in a water glass filled to the top, and you have to retrieve the cork out of the glass without using your hands. So I'm sure my mother was very proud of me and my hard-earned college
Kelly.
degree.
Excuse me, Kelly. I don't know that one. How do you get it out?
Well, you put your hands behind your back and you stand out of your seat and you lean over the glass, and you have to use your lips and tongue to fish, or it's kind of like bobbing for apples, but
Okay.
it's remarkably ridiculous and fun. Tend to get wet.
Okay. Nice. Oh yeah, I forgot all about those tricks. Yeah, I used to do that wine bottle one all the time at Columbus, Yeah, won a few free drinks from that. Nice, nice.
I was just going to say I have a fun anecdote about my roommate at the time. Her name was Kim, and forgive me, I can't remember her last name. She worked in the boutique. I think she was from New York. She was a lot of fun, and she and I had an extra special experience at Sandpiper because we wore the same size. And anytime we got tired of whatever was in our own closets, we would just go fish through the other person's closet. And oftentimes we wouldn't see each other throughout the day. And then I'd see her at the disco, or I'd see her at dinner, and she would be wearing one of my formal gowns, or I would be wearing, one of her skirts and some flip-flops that I loved. And so we always had a lot of fun running into each other, wearing each other's outfits.
And I assume that Annie was your chief too then at reception, correct?
She was, and boy, did we love her. She was like a mom away from our family. She took such good care of us. I'm still in touch with her to this day. When I was living in Washington, D.C., she and Teach were in town from time to time, and we'd meet up for breakfast or lunch. And she's such an amazing person, both of them. And she was a blessing to have. In fact, she was also at Playa Blanca for a brief time when I was there after my next season. So it was really nice to have her around because, again, when you're a young kid right out of college and you're missing your family, she really was someone that we could lean on and love. Our reception team used to refer to ourselves as Annie's girls.
And sometimes Annie's angels.
Annie's angels, exactly.
Well, yeah, you mentioned Playa. So does your recruiter remember that you had asked for Playa, or you were lucky that something opened? Did you have it number one on your dream sheet? How does it happen that you get sent to the exact resort where you were a GM, when you were 15?
Sure. I believe it was fairly clear that that's where I wanted to go after I filled that contract at Sandpiper. And somebody remembered, because I remember the night they told me I got the contract, and I was so excited. I couldn't believe it. I was so happy. Everyone was so excited for me. And, here I am, all of a sudden, this dream that I've had for so long is actually happening. And I was so grateful that it fell the way that it did. I mean, I understand you don't always get what you ask for. I don't even think I had a second choice on my list.
It was Playa or bust, right?
Yes, sir. Playa or bust.
And you were after me. So I did the season before you at Playa. You know how it closes for the rainy season. So I was there the 96-97 season. And hopefully we left it all nice and clean and proper for you, because I have found there's something special about opening and closing a village. And I wonder if you feel the same way, like you're the first ones there and last ones to leave. Did you like that part of it?
I did. I loved it. I don't have as much of a recollection of the opening part, but I do specifically remember some very fun times toward the end when we were closing. And maybe I got there a little later, and there might have been other people there ahead of me that had done the bulk of the opening. But the resort itself is so beautiful. And at the end of our season, when all of the GMs had left, the GOs took time out to make sure that everybody had an opportunity to try out some of the other departments that they didn't get a chance to experience while they were busy working. So we had a night where we all did circus we had a night where we had a day where I took all or as many as we could accommodate all the geos on a long trail ride with the horses that were in the village. And the relationships that we had built over time and the fun that we got to have without actually working and just being able to kind of cut loose and be ourselves without being on, what Uria would say is our best behavior. It was a special time to just enjoy the village by ourselves.
Sandpiper, huge family village, lots of kids everywhere, and then your next season, Playa. So did you find a big difference between the going from a big family village to a supersized singles village?
Absolutely. There's no contest, Greg. I can't even tell you. Playa Blanca is so beautiful. It is was almost exactly like I remembered it from a teenager. And I loved both villages, but Sandpiper very much feels like a resort or a hotel, and you're right off the beaten path from Port St. Lucie. You can take a shuttle and go into town and go to the mall. While it felt like a tropical vacation because we were in Florida, it still felt like just being at a hotel up the street as compared to this beautiful place in Mexico, covered with bougainvillea bushes everywhere and the sun shining and the beautiful water. And there's definitely a difference between a singles village and the family village. There were, in fact, kids everywhere, all over Sandpiper, though I didn't have a lot of exposure being up at the front desk, didn't really have to interact, if you will, that much. But Playa Blanca was just a dream for me. It was so much fun and so beautiful there. And of course, doing what I love the most was just a magnificent experience.
You mentioned your chief of village, Uria, earlier. As you know, or maybe people might not know, she's no longer with us. She's in the Paradis des Géos. Do you have any memories of Uria?
I do. I remember being rather intimidated by her at first. She had a bit of a rough exterior. And, today I understand that it had to have been a difficult role to be in back then, being a woman chef de village. And I think she was doing her best to oversee things and keep things running smoothly. I know she was firm but fair. She was tough. But over the course of time, getting to know her, I did come to understand that she very much wanted to take care of us and was there to support us. And I, in fact, had my own moment with her just one-on-one to witness that kind of caretaking, mentoring type of mentality from her. So she's a special person.
Rest in peace. Yes.
Rest in peace.
All right. Now, does word of your singing talent reach the animation team here and they immediately put you in shows? Like, do they know you could sing?
They did. I was in a lot of shows. We actually there was one show that we did. It was like an earth, wind, and fire, fifth element type show that we did in Sandpiper. The choreographer was there and brought that show with her to Playa Blanca. So we repeated that there. There were many times when I was on stage singing. In fact, I actually got very severe laryngitis for some of the time that I was in Playa Blanca. And I had to go see an ear, nose, and throat specialist. I think I had to travel to Manzanillo in a taxi to see a specialist. And I remember sitting there with his limited English and my very poor Spanish, communicating to him what was wrong and him communicating to me how to relieve my symptoms. And I came back from the appointment, and I think the next night we were having some awards, or we were having something in the little disco area down underneath the cafeteria before you get into the theater. And Beben asked me, kind of while he was announcing, he leaned over and looked at me and kind of whispered and said, "Can you sing right now?" And I looked at him and I said, "I just got back from the ear, nose, and throat specialist. I don't think I'm going to be physically capable of doing it." But they relied on me a lot to sing there. It was a lot of fun.
Well, you mentioned Manzanillo. Did you ever have to do the dreaded, 6-hour run to Puerto Vallarta for an arrival at all? Or you?
Yes.
Oh, you did. Okay. Yes, that was awful.
Yes, and I think, and now that you just jogged my memory, I recall that they specifically selected me to go on a trip because I'd worked in reception before, and they figured I had some of those check-in skills that could be useful.
Did you sell Coronas on the buses like we did? Like we would buy beer. So on the way, to keep the GMs occupied on the way to the village. So did you buy beer? Did you have that for the guests on board?
I think we did, now that you mention it. I do have a vague recollection of that, yes. And I remember going down the aisle of the bus as we were taking this long and winding path, trying to stand upright and go through all of the check-in cards and key cards and making sure we had everybody. And I was doing that whole process standing on this very narrow roadway back to the club.
Yeah, that road from Puerto Vallarta was never straight at all. Like, I don't even think you could never land a plane on that road. Okay. And did you also on Wednesdays, I guess it was a Mexican day where, the mariachi band would come in, they would do the show, like a cultural show. And also there would be a picnic at 12. Did your team do that as well?
We did do that. We would dress the horses up in serapes and adorn them with bougainvillea flowers, and we would get all dressed up and follow the mariachis in the parade. And I'm not sure if we're talking about the same thing, if that's where the margarita ride meets the rest of the crew down on the beach during that day.
Yes, the margarita ride, the margarita kayak, and the margarita walk. Yes, would depart at the same time. Yeah, we did all three. I don't know if your team did all three, but yeah, we did all three.
Wednesday was my favorite day of the week. What's funny about this, I tell this story to everyone, that when I was a teenager, I attended a margarita ride. We got on horses and took this beautiful path down to the beach and landed on the beach and sat through the picnic. And I remember thinking to myself, heavens forbid someone should drink a margarita and then get on their horse and ride all the way home. It's so irresponsible. And I, as a young teenager, it's just a little goody. I thought that was just, who would ever do that? And fast forward, 10 years or so less than, I'm leading that ride every week, and it was so much fun. And I will tell you, people are much better riders when they just had a little bit to drink. I have a very funny story to tell you about that if there's time.
Yeah, we have time, sure.
So we were leading the margarita ride and went down to the beach and had a great time. It's always fun. People, play games, and there's all the shrimp and everything that the shrimp quesadillas, and everything was so lovely and wonderful. And then we saddle back up and head home through the same path that we took there. And on the way home, people were much more relaxed and were typically singing and conversing and laughing and having a good time. And I would always get to this one spot on the trail that was a little bit of a grade upward, up a hill through the trees, sort of wound around like a little snaky path up the hill. And I would turn around and I'd ask the crowd behind me, hey, are you guys ready to run a little bit? And everybody was like, woohoo, yay, let's do it. They were all very excited. And what they didn't understand was all of the horses on this trail, they'd done this ride about 5,000 times. They knew where they were. They knew where to turn. They knew where to stop. So all I had to do was say, okay, let's go. And all the horses would take off running up the hill, and everybody was hooting and hollering. And then they'd get up to the top of the road and stop. And everybody would have a great time, and these horses just took care of everybody. But it was so fun to watch people just kind of lose their inhibition a little bit, just enough to make it the ride of their life. People just had so much fun on that ride.
And to get back in time for the cannonball contest in the pool, right? Well, no, that's what we did. I don't know if you guys did that. Okay. All right.
I was going to say, I regret to say, while everybody else was racing back for the cannonball contest, we were probably putting up the horses and tucking them in for the night, which was, of course, something I love to do. So,
yeah, let's shout out your horse. What was your horse's name there?
So we had a few of them that we liked to ride, but there was one named Guerrero. He was a special guy who had he had some really amazing dressage skills that he would show off for us now and again. And then there was Vaquero, who was a wildfire, and we didn't let any of the GMs ride that horse. He was for GOs only. And so when we took him out for long rides where we were galloping across the beachy, sandy beach, he was GO only. But they all had a special place in my heart. We had a horse there that we named after Uria, in fact.
Oh, nice. You had another future chief of village here. Your chief of sport was Vincent Benazi. Shout out Vincent, who later became a chief of village, correct?
I believe that's true, yes.
Now, let me ask you about that part in the show where I like to do some shout outs. So people that you liked working with, made an impression on you? Do you have any names for me?
I do have names. I have, well, of course, there's Catherine Cloud. She was from Sandpiper. Danielle Noblet, who was aerobics and various other things, but I saw her both at Sandpiper and Playa Blanca. So it was, again, fun to see repeat geos that I, knew, and it was like coming home to family. Annie Mayer was at Playa Blanca, and I love her so much. There's Gavin Coe. He was on the scuba team, who is, I still remain close with. Just a shout out to Debbie Hines, who is no longer with us, who was also on the scuba team, who was a very close friend of mine. In fact, she came to visit me right before my wedding that was canceled due to COVID. She came out and helped me extend the very sad message to all of my family and friends that I had to cancel my wedding. So bless her heart and may she rest in peace. There's so many amazing people. Vincent Rother, who was the chief of circus at Playa Blanca. We are friends on Facebook, and I believe he's a stuntman now in Canada, and had a special place in my heart for him because he was one of those people that I took on that horseback ride at the end of the season when we were closing the village. And he was riding right behind me as we were running home through the sandy beach one day. And he was in such a moment of joy. And he thanked me profusely for allowing him to have that experience. And I felt so touched that I could do something for someone like that. And so I always have a special place in my heart for that moment when we were all on that ride. And Vincent was so excited. So it was a lot of fun.
I only did the horseback riding twice when I was there. And I specifically remember we were up in this grassy hill, or climbing a grassy hill. And all of a sudden I started sliding to the right, and to my right was down the hill. And apparently it's, to this day, it's still contested whose fault it was, who should have checked my saddle. But good naturedly, it was like in slow motion, and the guy that was leading the tour was behind me, and he saw me. Yeah, he goes, "Yeah, you kind of just started falling," and I didn't know what was going on. But not only did I fall off the horse, I fell down the steep slope of the hill. Okay. I didn't get hurt, mind you.
No, did you hurt yourself?
Oh no, not at all, because it was so steep. It kind of caught me. You know what I mean? But it was just, we couldn't stop laughing about it after the fact. It was just so funny, that I'm like, well, should someone have checked that strap? Yeah, the rider should have. Yeah, but I'm a noob. Okay, but no.
Well, you know what they say, Greg.
What?
You know what they say. You have to fall off a horse 100 times at least before you can be considered a good rider.
Well, yeah, that's, I was going to ask you that. And also, did you ever by accident, or just you turned your back at the wrong time, to like a horse ever bite you in the shoulder or anything?
They do that sometimes. Yes. Some of them are known for doing it more than others, and you have to be careful. But I will tell you what happened one time. I was leading a ride, and when you lead trail rides, oftentimes your eye will be turned all the way around to the back of my horse so that I can have a conversation with the GMs. So my horse is leading the trail. I'm riding backwards. I'm talking. And then one time I turned around and my whole face went right through a huge spider web. And there was a big spider right on the top of my helmet. I freaked out. You know how big the spiders and the vegetables there are gigantic.
Yeah, well, they have tarantulas at Playa. I used to see them on the power walk all the time. So yeah, well, just in general, getting a spider, nothing worse than a spider web across your face, but you really don't want that in Mexico, right?
Terrible experience, but I guess that's part of the job.
Well, does it hurt to get bit by a horse?
It does. Their teeth and jaws are very strong. So you definitely want to keep your fingers and your elbows, and oftentimes when you're kind of leaned over and you're working on cleaning up their feet or you're grooming them, they'll lean around and catch you in the bum, or they'll catch you in the elbow or something. It can hurt. You usually know when it's a horse that doesn't, and you can be prepared and kind of give them a little tap on the muzzle to get out of your way when they lean back to get you.
Have you gone back to Clemet at all for a reunion or a family vacation since you left?
I haven't done a reunion, but I would not be opposed to doing that someday. I did go back for vacation with the guy I was dating at the time. We went to Turks and Caicos and did a scuba week there. And trying to remember, there were two guys that worked at scuba at Playa that were at Turks and Caicos when we vacationed there. And forgive me, I can't remember Steve and
There's always a Steve on the scuba team, or
Yeah.
a Steve-O. Yeah.
Yeah.
And any scuba team,
Yeah.
that's the law.
And yes, Scuba Steve. And I remember, though, how relieved I was to be on vacation and not necessarily have to get up and do the crazy signs, or not, I could just kind of relax and do my own thing. So it was a very nice vacation. And I tell people to this day, if they want a really good vacation, they should always consider Club Med.
Is there anything you miss about Club Med? Like, even when you're working there, like, do you miss lunch? Do you miss not having to do dishes? Do you miss not having to go in traffic? What do you miss?
I very much miss just sort of the campus of Playa Blanca, just the location and the feel of such a breath of fresh air, and it's so beautiful there. And I remember on days I would stand out on the balcony and look over the cove and really try to remind myself that, be in the moment and really take all this environment in, because when you go back to the real world, you're going to be working Monday through Friday, 9 to 5, perhaps, or maybe not. But, I just remembered how beautiful it was there and how much I wanted to take those moments in, because you're not always going to get to be in a beautiful location like that. And I would say another thing that I miss is just the camaraderie that you get with working on a team like that. I feel like we were so knit and experienced such a unique thing together. You can't really explain that to your loved ones or your friends outside of the club. You can explain it, but they don't really quite get it. There's so much that goes on in your heart and your mind and your memories. I just really cherished having that kind of companionship and camaraderie with people that worked at the club. And to this day, like you and I, when we first talked to each other, we were on the phone for the longest time, and we could go on and on and on because there's so many wonderful memories.
Yes. Well said. Well said, Kelly. All right. Before we leave Playa, because it was such a special time for me and for you as well, I just want to make sure we got everything. Do you have any, other stories or anecdotes from that season, the 97-98 season?
I do. It was such a great time. I particularly recall moments where you get to know the other GOs so well because you spend so much time with them. At dinner, you're with the guests and they're always asking questions. And we have, of course, many of the same answers because we're telling our life story. And there was one week where the one I mentioned who passed, she and I were sitting at the dinner table together, and we decided that we would challenge each other to tell each other's story because we had listened to it and learned it so well. So there was one evening at dinner where I assumed the role of the scuba instructor and she assumed the role of the horseback riding instructor. And it was a very fun moment at dinner, watching each other answer the GM's questions and hoping that we were getting them all right and that we were being technical enough and that we, were able to pass the mustard, if you know what I mean. Fun time at dinner.
Yeah, no offense to horseback riding, but scuba, as you know, that's a technical sport. Okay, so but luckily for you, you were certified in scuba, right?
Thankfully, I was. I had gotten certified while I was at the club that season.
This is Debbie you were talking about, right?
Yes, Debbie Hines.
Okay. And what's your other story?
The animator who was there pulled off the funniest, I thought one of the funniest things I had seen. He was dressed up like a gentleman that was on the ski slopes. And he had in full ski outfit, ski boots, ski hat, parka. He had a pair of skis draped over his shoulder, and with the ski lift tickets hanging off of his jacket, the full thing. And he was wandering around the village, and it must have been 90 degrees and humid like crazy. And he wandered around all day long asking people where the ski lift was. And I just thought it was so funny. It was so out of context and so hilarious. He was a lot of fun.
No, I'm glad you remember that, because usually that's one of my questions in rapid fire. Is there a certain passage from an animator that you liked? So that's nice of you to remember that. And yeah, I would never have done that if you paid me double my salary. Okay.
It was very risky.
Yeah. I was like a Pario guy that season, what? I thought I can wear my Pario all day. Sold. Okay. When you're 15 years old at Playa, well, let's take a moment to thank the person who started you on your journey. Would you like to take a moment to do that?
Most definitely. My mom, Sandy, she was is an amazing woman, and she took my brother and I on the trip of a lifetime, and it changed me forever. And I would never do it another way. I'm so thankful for that vacation. It shaped the way that I planned out my young adult life. And I just want to thank her again for giving us everything we've ever wanted all of our lives and leading us in such a positive direction. And she's an amazing person, and I owe so much to her. But that trip was unforgettable. I'm
going to thank her too in my own way. Is that okay?
Of course.
Sandy, 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 SANDYY, because you're Sandy, 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 Sandy. Okay, sorry, I'm borrowing from the Kelly song.
I loved it. Thank you so much for that.
Yeah, let's not forget Catherine Cloward again. Thank you so much, Catherine, for introducing me to this beautiful person here, Kelly. Greatly appreciate that, Catherine.
Thank you, Catherine, so much. I adore you.
All right, now looking at your village timeline here, I can only assume, but I want you to answer the question anyway. Are you happy that you had the experience?
Without a doubt. It was an amazing experience. I loved every minute of it. It changed my life, and it's shaped me, who I am today.
Nice. Would you do it all over again? I would. Okay.
If I could turn back the clock and be 23 again, yes. At my age now, no way.
Okay. All right. Well, listeners, Kelly has sent me a lot of nice photos from her time at Sandpiper and Playa. So make sure you head out to the My First Season Facebook page to check out all her photos. And that beautiful photo of you and that horse, is that Guerrero or is that Vaccaro? Which one are you cleaning?
That's Guerrero.
Okay. All right. Yeah. So please check out her amazing photos. If you're a 90s Geo, you're going to love this episode and love her photos. My thanks again to you, Kelly, for taking the time to share your story with us here today. Thank you so much for doing this.
Thank you, Greg, really for taking the time and spending the time doing this with people and jogging all of those wonderful memories. Thank you so much.
My pleasure. And, if anyone after listening to your episode, Kelly reaches out to you and, would like to do it, just give them my name, and anyone else listening, I know you're out there. So you can just send me a message anywhere you want, on Facebook. I answer all messages. So because I don't know if you want to do it, unless you let me know you want to do it. So please don't hesitate. Would you find the process that we did, Kelly, to be as pain-free as possible?
It was absolutely pain-free. You were a fearless leader. You guided me in all the directions necessary to get it done. And I really do appreciate all the time that you spent. And thank you so much. It was a really great experience. I had a lot of fun.
This has been a paid promotion. No, I did not pay Kelly to say that. That was her own free will. Okay. Well, I had such a great time. Thank you for answering all my dumb questions about polo and what's it like to sing on an all-state honor choir. Thank you for that, because you have such an interesting backstory. I really wanted to talk about it. So thank you again so much, Kelly. Thank you.
Thank you, Greg.
Well, listeners, that was the one and only Kelly Hammett, and we'll see you all here next week with another episode. Say bye, Kelly.
Bye.